A Bullet in the Ballet by Caryl Brahms and S.J. Simon. Abridged and read by David Rumelle. A Bullet in the Ballet. Episode 3. Investigating the murder of the ballet Stroganoff's leading dancer, Inspector Quill becomes further involved in the company's bizarre lifestyles.
Quill sat over his after-lunch coffee, trying to sort the miscellany of information that he had thrust upon him into some sort of order. The situation recorded in his notebook now stood as follows. Palooka being killed by a revolver fired at the climax of the ballet Petrushka when all eyes would have been on the stage, most likely from one of the two balconies on the left and right of stage. Motive for murder. According to Stanley, there is an abundance of motives. Palooka appears to have been the best-hated man in the company. Investigate the following. Stroganoff. Palooka was about to form a rival company under auspices of Lord Buttonhook, taking Stroganoff's best dancers. This presumably would mean ruin, therefore ample motive. Check S's movements at time. Rubinska, jilted by Palooka, danced doll in Petrushka, found by Arienskaya shortly after murder in dressing room, very distressed and with full knowledge of events. How did she know? Kasha Ranievsky, in love with Rubinska and growing intimacy with Palooka, possibly assumed, danced coachman in Petrushka. Pavel, pervert, danced more in Petrushka, apparently second best-hated man in company, intimate with Palooka, but objects to growing friendship between Palooka and Kasha. Leaves stage after first death of Petrushka before the end of the ballet. Subsequent movements unknown. Find out. Serge Appelsin, dresser and intimate of Pavel, thrown over by Pavel in favour of Palooka. Furiously jealous. Movements at time of crime unknown. Inquire. Arienskaya, former mistress of Palooka, claims her husband did not mind. Probably correct, but P. Putik, husband of Arienskaya, once famous dancer, walker on in Petrushka, and on Stanley's list as one of the people on left-hand balcony in scene. Question on subject of wife's infidelity and try to gather real feelings. Volti Subito, conductor, bad terms with Palooka, motive hardly adequate, but Stanley hints maybe other and better grievances. First-class shot. Opportunity to shoot unobserved unlikely, but just possible as all eyes are on the stage. On the whole, Quill was fairly satisfied with the morning's work. He had to interview the people on his list and confirm and expand the information in his possession. He called for his bill. Back at the theatre, Quill asked for Pavel and was directed to his dressing room. Quill knocked. "Ah, Mr. Inspector, it is nice of you to call." Pavel, revolting in the resplendent dressing gown, gushed a welcome. Behind him, a tall, bullet-headed man with slanting eyes and high cheekbones stood in non-committal silence. This, thought Quill, must be Serge Appelsin, the jealous dresser. "Make yourself comfortable," fawned Pavel. "Whiskey and soda?" "There is no soda," said Serge grimly, "or whiskey." "Never mind," said Pavel. "We will make you Russian tea instead. Serge, the kettle." Pavel sighed. "Oh, Palooka, he was my best friend. But do not let him hear." He pointed to Appelsin, who had retreated to the wardrobe. "He is jealous, that one." "Quite," said Quill. "What an artist," said Pavel. "What a dancer. His death is a loss irreparable to the company. It is true that I shall dance Petrushka as well as he, maybe a little better, but who now shall dance the Moor?" What would Stroganoff say to this? Quill found himself thinking. There was only one answer. "Poof," he said experimentally. The effect was electrical. In an instant all Pavel's amiability had departed. He leapt to his feet, livid and quivering, while Appelsin leapt and quivered beside him. "The Moor," said Pavel, "is the most difficult role in the ballet." "Every educated person knows that," said Serge. "He is symbolic." "He has a scene all to himself." And a pas de deux. He is subtle. He must depict passion. There is no one in the company except Pavel subtle enough to take him. That seemed to be that. Quill offered his cigarettes, but his gaspers were scornfully waved to one side. "I would like," said Quill, "to ask you a few questions about the time Paluk died." The two men glanced at each other. "Alas," they said in union, "we know nothing." Quill assured them it was a matter of mere routine. In the case of murder, he had to question everybody. "When you left the stage yesterday," he asked Pavel, "where did you go?" Pavel pondered. "I stand in the wings to take my curtain." "Curtains," corrected Appleseed. "The left or the right wing?" "The right." "And did you take your curtains?" Pavel pondered again, and to Quill he seemed a little uneasy. "Certainement," he said at last. "Then presumably you did not hear that Paluk had been shot till later." "Much later," agreed Pavel. "As a matter of form," said Quill, "did anybody see you standing in the wings?" "Mais oui," said Appleseed. "I was with him. I wait with him with the dressing-gown." "This dressing-gown," said Pavel proudly. "Who else was near you?" Neither of them could remember. There were many people in the wings at the end of Petrushka, but they were of no interest. Quill persisted, but neither Pavel nor Appleseed could remember. The pair ushered him out with solicitude, but to Quill there seemed a certain amount of relief in their bearing at his departure. Quill's next call was on Stroganoff. "Ah," he beamed at Quill, "the man who has never seen Petrushka." "Whiskey and soda?" asked Stroganoff, but there was no whiskey, only Russian tea. Quill refused firmly. Stroganoff was sorry and poured himself out an enormous glass. "And our assassin?" he asked cosily. "You have found him, no?" "We're doing our best," said Quill. "The inquest is on Friday. I'm afraid you must attend. It won't take long, and anyway they'll pay you for it." "Poof," said Stroganoff. "The money, it interests me not. I am an artist." "How much?" Quill temporized and succeeded in leaving Stroganoff under the impression that he was coming into a small fortune. "Me," he beamed affluently at Quill, "I have the theory. I tell you. Today when I lunch, I begin suddenly to think who I ask would want to kill Paluk. Everybody, I answer. But who would want to kill him specially, I continue. Well, there are still many people. There is even myself. I do all for Paluk. I make him a star. I give him best dressing room. I lend him money. And all he says is contract. But me, I do not suspect myself, so I know it must be somebody else. Quill suppressed a smile. "I follow your reasoning," he said gravely. "Then I ask myself, Arienskaya? No. Putik? No. Kasia? Pavel? Nevazhna? No. The corps de ballet? No, they work too hard. Stanley? Perhaps. But he is too stupid. He would miss. The little Rubinska? No. But the mother of Rubinska? I tell myself, here is a different colour of a cow." "Horse," corrected Quill. "Horse," agreed Stroganoff affably. "That mother I put nothing past her. She's an awful woman. A assassin, a chicamo, she is him." "And your reasons for this view?" "You English, you always want a reason," said Stroganoff irritably. "For me it is enough that I suspect." "But what makes you suspect?" Stroganoff sought a sulky refuge in his tea. Then suddenly he brightened. "Yesterday," he said, "she came to me before the performance and asked to borrow my revolver. She always asks for something, so I lent it to her and think nothing of it." This was altogether incredible. Quill said as much. Stroganoff persisted weakly, but eventually gave way. "Oh, all right," he admitted cheerfully. "That I invent, but now I tell you the truth. It is, you will understand, la scandale, so you must not repeat. Until last year," he began, "the little Rubinska, she danced the Swan Queen. Common petite vierge, no good. Often I tell her so, 'My child, you must take yourself a lover,' and I select for her many estimable young men. But always she refuse. These English girls, they are so respectable. And then suddenly I notice she dance right. So I inquire, and to my disgust, it is Anton. Alas, I say, this is bad, une mauvaise affaire. Anton will tire soon, and poof, off he go." So, Stroganoff went on, he'd gone to warn her mother. Quill gathered it had been a difficult interview. She muddled the issue by insisting upon marriage. If the villain wouldn't marry her daughter, she said, she would strangle him with her own hands. But she shoot him instead, said Stroganoff happily, and leaned back in his chair with an air of triumph. But this man who'd never seen Petrushka seemed singularly hard to convince. He kept on worrying about the mother's opportunity to fire, but at that moment the door was flung open and a large, disgruntled tornado burst into the room. A smaller tornado followed. The large tornado circled the room and came furiously to rest in front of Stroganoff's desk, where it solidified into the formidable outlines of Madame Rubinska, and demanded, "Is it correct that you have decided to give Anton's dressing room to that man?" "Which man?" said Stroganoff, playing for time. "Pavel," put in the small tornado, who in repose appeared as a dark, tired wisp of a girl. She had the soft voice of a dancer and a dancer's large, expressive eyes. Her mouth was also large, but this she inherited from her mother. "Pavel," echoed the large tornado. "Pavel!" And the concrete walls quivered beneath the noxious syllables. "All right," said Stroganoff defiantly. "I give it to Pavel. So what do you do?" "I'll tell you what I'll do," said the tornado. "I'll tell you what I'll do." "Maybe," asked the ever-hopeful Stroganoff, "you'd like your contract back, no?" "Exactly. Unless that flying fish goes out of the dressing room tonight, I go to Button Hook tomorrow." "Alone?" asked Stroganoff. "With my daughter. She shall not dance for you again. Boof! Furthermore, she shall not dance for you tonight." This shook Stroganoff, but not nearly as hard as it shook Rubinska. It was to be her first London appearance in Lac des Cygnes since her celebrated deflowering, her first chance to confound the critics who last year had markedly admired nothing but her technique. And here was Mamma getting impulsive again. "Aren't we being rather hasty, Mother?" she put in. A hurt and dazed tornado flopped into an armchair. Quill felt that had she known the expression, she would have said "et tu, Brute." "After all," continued Rubinska, "Pavel is a star, and we don't want to upset him. Besides, his lifts are magnificent." "Lifts?" soughed the tornado. "They are important," said Stroganoff critically. "Not as important as elevation." "And not so important as that matter of the dressing room." "A good elevation," pursued Stroganoff, "it is a quarter of the combat. The other 3/4 is the management. A good management," he added quickly, "it is like a mother of a dancer. It pushes, it praises, it is always by her side." "If," said the tornado grimly, "you imagine you can flatter me into forgetting my daughter's interests for a moment, you are wrong." She flounced out of her chair, easily evaded Stroganoff's gallant attempt to kiss her hand, and sailed out. The daughter followed obediently. "Poof," said Stroganoff uneasily. "Poof," agreed Quill. "Now you have seen her," said Stroganoff, "you are convinced that she is the assassin, no?" "You said she was on the balcony that night." "Sure," said Stroganoff. "I see her myself." "Then where exactly were you at the time of the murder?" Stroganoff shifted uneasily. "Poof," he said, "this does not matter." Stroganoff pleaded it was personal business and nothing to do with the crime. Quill insisted it was merely a matter of routine. Thus pressed, Stroganoff admitted reluctantly that he'd been in his box during the fatal act, when suddenly he noticed someone on the right-hand balcony who had no right to be there. "An impostor," he said indignantly. "An impersonator. So me, I run to the wings, borrow the Arabian dressing gown, and climb up to catch him blue-handed. But I am too slow." "Did you see anybody on the balcony when you were up there?" asked Quill. "But there were many people," said Stroganoff. "Only they are all coming down. But I push and only look for one man." "And this man you were looking for? Who is he?" "That," said Stroganoff, "is a matter for the Ballet Stroganoff only." "In a case of murder, it's also the business of the police. I must insist on his name." "Me, I forget," said Stroganoff evasively. "It is difficult to remember all those long Russian names, no?" he added hopefully. However, Quill was not to be put off. For 5 minutes Stroganoff wriggled and prevaricated, after which time he yielded the name. It was that of Pavel's dresser, Serge Apessine.